This happened about 20 years ago, back when I still believed the woods were just woods, back when a lake was just water, and when a missing child meant someone had gotten lost. I was heading out to fish beyond a stretch of farmland locals used to call Fox Hollow. It wasn't much of a town, just a handful of houses, a feed store, a gas pump that worked when it felt like it. 30 miles east sat the nearest real town. Another 5 past that, you hit the edge of Blackwood National Forest. That's where the land changed. You'd ride past open fields for an hour or two, sun beating down on wheat and dust, and then suddenly the road narrowed, trees closed in, and the air thickened, like you'd stepped through something unseen, like you weren't alone anymore. Deep in that forest stood a tree everyone called the Queen Pine, an old-growth relic, wider than any oak, tall enough to make your neck ache if you tried to see the top. People drove in from out of state just to take pictures of it. They built a boardwalk around it a few years back, added trail markers, a little parking lot. But if you left the boardwalk behind, if you pushed deeper into the forest where the signs stopped and the trails faded, you'd eventually hear water, a narrow stream that spilled over a sandy drop and emptied into a green lake. The lake was wrong, always had been. Part of it disappeared beneath a low overhang of packed clay and pine roots, forming a sheet of water that extended into darkness. Beneath that overhang were natural tunnels. How far they went, no one knew. Some said they connected to old mining shafts. Others said the earth just swallowed what it wanted. I used to fish there all the time. Used to. I rode my bike slow that morning, not because the road was rough, but because of the silence. There's a kind of silence before you enter deep forest. Thick, waiting. The tires hummed over dirt. The frame creaked beneath me. My old mutt Rusty, golden, shaggy, smarter than most people, ran beside me. He'd glance up now and then, like he was asking how much farther. I had a backpack slung over one shoulder, collapsible rod, can of worms, bread, knife, small cook kit. Enough for a full day by the water. Nothing unusual. Except the feeling, that subtle sense you get when something is aware of you before you're aware of it. The first pines appeared scattered and thin, then denser. Then the forest closed around me like a hand. The air grew heavier with sap and damp soil. Old needles muffled the ground. Even the sunlight seemed reluctant to reach too far between the trunks. I've always loved that transition. Step out of the open world. Step into something older. Something that doesn't care if you're there. I heard the stream before I saw it. A steady, low pouring sound. Rusty slowed. His ears went up. Then, unexpectedly, he pressed closer to my leg. That got my attention. He wasn't a skittish dog. Coyotes didn't bother him. Deer didn't bother him. But this was different. I turned toward the sound, and that's when I saw the man. He stood near the bank of the stream, leaning against a pine. Tall, lean build, faded gray jacket, rifle slung over his shoulder. Face sharp, tired, eyes dark. Rusty let out a low growl. The man didn't flinch. "Easy," he said calmly, looking at the dog. "No need for noise out here." I stepped off my bike. "Morning," I said. "Headed to the lake. Do some fishing." He nodded once, barely. Then his eyes shifted to me. "You here?" he asked. "Hear what?" "My daughter's missing." The words didn't land at first. "What?" 3 days now. His jaw tightened. "We searched yesterday, from sunrise to dark. Nothing. I felt something in my stomach drop. How old? 12. I knew who he meant then. Lily Harper. Quiet kid, always wandering near the tree line. The kind of child who preferred creeks over playgrounds. When did she go missing? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the forest behind me. If you're heading to the lake, he said slowly, keep your eyes open. He studied my face carefully. And keep that dog close. Something about the way he said it made the air colder. You think she's there? I asked. He hesitated. Then, places around that lake aren't right. My mouth went dry. I knew the lake well. The green water, the overhang, the tunnels. I'd fished there 50 times. He stepped slightly closer. You sure you want to go? I'm just fishing, I said, though it sounded weak even to me. Fishing, he repeated softly. Then his tone shifted. And if you see circles on the water, perfect ones, like someone's dropping stones over and over. He held my gaze. Don't go near it. Run. I nodded. Didn't understand, but I nodded. He stared at me one last time, as if memorizing me, then turned and walked along the stream, moving quiet as smoke. Rusty watched him go. The forest felt tighter after he left. I adjusted my pack and rode deeper. The ground changed as I neared the lake. Dry moss turned damp. Damp turned to soft sand. The trees leaned closer together, and then the green water came into view. Still, breathing slow, waiting. The lake lay there like it always had, wide, green, quiet, but quiet in a way that felt deliberate. The surface held the sky in a dull reflection, broken only by the shadow where the clay overhang reached out above the water. Beneath that low shelf of earth and pine roots, the lake slid inward into darkness. I could never see more than a few yards into that space. After that, the water simply disappeared under the forest floor. Rusty didn't run ahead like he usually did. He stayed close to my knee. I walked the bike down the last stretch of sandy slope and laid it beside a drift log near the shore. The air here always felt cooler, heavier. You could smell wet clay and something mineral underneath it, like stone that hadn't seen daylight in a long time. I chose my usual spot, a narrow tongue of sand that pushed out into the water just enough to give me a clean drop-off. The depth fell away quick there, perfect for bluegill and small bass. I unpacked slowly. Rod extended with a soft metallic click. Line threaded through guides. Float clipped on about 2 feet up. Worm from the can, fat, twisting, alive in my fingers. Cast. The float landed near the shadow line, under the overhang. It bobbed once, twice, then settled. Rusty lay down behind me, chin on his paws, eyes fixed on the water like he understood the game. First bite came quick. The float tipped sideways, slid under, smooth as a breath. I lifted. Weight. A steady pull. Not frantic, just alive. I reeled it in, a palm-sized bluegill flashing silver green in the filtered light. It slapped the sand once before I unhooked it and dropped it into the bucket. Second cast. Second bite. Third. The lake behaved normally. Fish fed. The line moved the way it should. The world made sense again. By noon, I'd caught enough for dinner. My hands smelled like scales and lake water. My shoulders had that slow ache from repetition. The tension I'd carried from the encounter with the father had thinned a little. Maybe he was just desperate. Maybe I'd let his fear crawl under my skin. I set the rod aside and started a small fire in a shallow pit I'd scraped before. Just enough to boil water and warm up some food. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would scar the place. The smoke rose thin and pale through the trees. I ate simple. Hard-boiled eggs, tomato, bread, a can of stew poured over leftover pasta I'd packed from breakfast. Rusty got a crust soaked in gravy. He swallowed it whole. I poured myself a little moonshine from a flask I kept for days like this. It burned clean and quick. The forest seemed to breathe out around me. No wind, just a faint drip from the overhang where cold water seeped down into the lake. After I stamped out the fire and scattered the ash, I lay back on a tarp with my backpack under my head. Rusty curled against my side. The lake lapped gently at the sand. Somewhere deep in the forest, a branch snapped. Then nothing. My eyes closed. I don't know how long I slept. Could have been 10 minutes. Could have been an hour. I woke to a sound I'd never heard from Rusty before. Not a bark, not a growl. A sharp, strangled yelp, cut short. I sat up so fast my vision blurred. "Rusty!" No answer. The tarp was empty beside me. The sand showed fresh paw prints, deep, urgent, leading toward the overhang, toward the cave mouth. My pulse spiked. "Rusty, here!" Silence. Then a faint scrape of claws on wet clay. I grabbed my flashlight from the bag, small, cheap, but better than nothing, and jogged toward the shaded entrance beneath the overhang. The temperature dropped immediately. The ceiling lowered enough that I had to duck slightly. Clay walls, packed and hardened like brick. The space widened after a few steps, 2, maybe 3 feet taller inside. Light from the lake stretched in a pale green rectangle behind me, fading the deeper I went. The air smelled metallic, wet. Echo swallowed my breathing and gave it back to me, distorted. The ground was soft in patches, mud and sand mixed. And there they were, Rusty's paw prints, fresh, leading left at the first split. "Buddy," I muttered under my breath, trying to steady myself. The beam of the flashlight jittered slightly in my hand. I followed the prints. Water dripped from somewhere above, each drop landing with a hollow tick that seemed too loud in the confined space. Another fork. Paw prints again, this time smudged slightly, as if he'd slipped. I moved faster. Then I saw a figure at the mouth of the cave behind me. A human shape, framed by the green light from the lake. Tall, still, watching. "Hey!" I shouted. "Who's there?" The silhouette didn't move, didn't answer. And then, the crack of a rifle shot exploded through the cave. The bullet hit somewhere above me, showering grit and clay down over my shoulders. I dropped instinctively, heart slamming. "Don't shoot!" I yelled. "It's me! I'm fishing! I'm looking for my dog!" Another shot. Closer. Clay burst from the wall near my head. The echo turned the gunfire into something monstrous, like the cave itself was roaring. "Stop!" I shouted again. "You're shooting at the wrong guy!" From the entrance, the father's voice came back, raw, strained. "I know what you are." My blood went cold. "What? You think I don't see you move?" Another shot. I ran, deeper into the cave, left then right, barely thinking. The flashlight beam bounced wildly over wet clay, over narrow passages that twisted like intestines. My breath came sharp and shallow. The gunfire stopped, but I could still hear movement behind me. Boots, or something like boots, scraping, following. I slowed at a fork and killed the flashlight for a second. Darkness swallowed me whole. In that black silence, I heard it. A single step. Not close, not far. Just enough to know something else shared the space with me. "Rusty," I whispered. Nothing. Then, faintly from deeper within, a whimper. Left passage. I flicked the light back on and moved. The tunnel narrowed before opening into a slightly wider chamber, ceiling higher, walls drier. And there, pressed against the clay at the far end, was a girl. 12 years old, filthy, shaking. Eyes too big for her face. "Lily?" I breathed. She flinched like I'd struck her. "It's okay," I said quickly. "Your dad's looking for you. The whole town is." She shook her head violently. "That's not him," she whispered. The words didn't make sense at first. "What?" "That man by the water," she said, voice barely audible. "That's not my dad." A cold wave moved through me. "What are you talking about?" "I met him in the woods," she said. "He said he knew a shortcut home. He walked me toward the lake. Then he grabbed me." Her hands trembled. "I bit him. I ran. He chased me in here. He waits by the exits." The flashlight trembled in my grip. Behind us, somewhere deeper in the tunnels, something shifted. A soft, dragging sound. My mouth went dry. "Can you walk?" She winced. "My ankle." Of course it was. I stepped toward her. "We'll move slow. There's another exit?" She nodded weakly toward a narrow slit between two clay walls. "There's a drop near the water," she whispered. "It comes out close to the stream." If we could reach the stream, we could circle wide back to town. If. I slipped an arm under her shoulder. She was light. Too light. We moved into the narrow passage. Behind us, the faintest click. Metal. Safety switching off. The sound carried through the cave like a heartbeat, and a voice echoed behind us. Closer now. "You can't run from water." It wasn't strained this time. It wasn't desperate. It was calm. And it was not the same voice I'd heard in the forest. Rusty growled somewhere in the dark. Low, ferocious. And then something lunged out of the black behind us. Something exploded out of the dark behind us. Not a shadow, not a trick of light. Fur, teeth, breath. Rusty. He hit whatever was coming at us with a force that knocked the air from the cave. There was a grunt, human at first, then something wet and wrong beneath it. A scuffle. Clay scraping under boots. A curse. I shoved Lily forward through the narrow slit between the walls. "Go!" I hissed. She crawled, dragging her bad ankle, vanishing into the tight passage. I turned just long enough to see Rusty locked onto a forearm, teeth buried deep into a gray sleeve. The man, if it was a man, staggered backward. The rifle clattered to the ground. In the beam of my flashlight, his face came into focus for the first time. It wasn't the same face from the forest. The shape was similar. The build was similar. But the eyes were wrong. They were too wide, too still, like glass marbles set too deep. Rusty snarled and shook his head, tearing fabric. The man didn't scream the way someone should when their arm is being ripped open. He just stared at me and smiled. Not wide, not angry, just a thin, knowing curl of the mouth. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. Back?
I didn't have time to ask. I grabbed the rifle from the floor and swung the butt into his ribs as hard as I could. He folded, not like a man collapsing, but like something jointed incorrectly. Rusty leapt clear as the figure hit the clay wall. The flashlight flickered. For 1/2 second, the beam died completely. And in that pitch black, I heard something else move. Not the man. Something behind him, deeper in the cave. Something shifting in the water. The light came back. The gray jacket lay crumpled on the ground, empty. The man was gone. No footprints leading away, no body, just the jacket. Rusty stood stiff, ears flat, staring at the darkness beyond. I didn't stay to question it. "Rusty, come!" I ducked into the narrow slit Lily had taken. Clay scraped my shoulders as I squeezed through. Rusty followed close, breathing hard. The passage angled downward sharply. My shoes slipped in wet sand. The air grew colder. I could hear the lake now, not the gentle lap from before, but a hollow, internal slosh, like water breathing inside stone.
We emerged at a low opening that slanted directly toward the waterline. The lake stretched black beneath the overhang. No sun reached here, only reflected green light. Lily stood at the edge, pale and shaking.
"He's there," she whispered. "Who?" "In the water."
I stepped beside her. The surface was smooth, too smooth. Then, one circle appeared. Perfect, centered about 10 feet out. Then another, and another. Each one forming clean, deliberate rings. Not random ripples, not wind. Like someone below was tapping the surface at exact intervals. Rusty whimpered. I remembered the warning. If you see circles on the water, run. But Lily swayed beside me. Her foot slipped slightly in the wet clay, and before I could grab her, the water moved. Not splashing upward, not violently. It parted, and a small head broke the surface. Hair slicked flat against a pale skull. Eyes open, unblinking. It looked like Lily, exactly like her. But the proportions were off. The joints beneath the water bent too sharply. The neck arched backward farther than bone should allow. The mouth opened. Water poured out. But the voice that came wasn't wet. It was clear. "Dad?" Lily froze. "That's not me," she whispered. The thing in the water tilted its head. "Dad," it repeated. Behind us, a boot scraped. I turned sharply. The real father stood in the tunnel entrance behind us, face bloodied, rifle raised. He looked at the water, saw the figure, and something inside him shattered. "Lily," he breathed. "No," I barked. "Don't!" But he stepped forward anyway. The circles on the water widened. The false Lily smiled. The father's foot reached the waterline, and Rusty lunged again. He hit the man square in the side, knocking him sideways just as his boot touched the surface. The water didn't splash. It grabbed. A thin, gray hand shot up from beneath and caught the cuff of his pant leg. Too long, too jointed. The father screamed. I dropped the rifle and grabbed him under the arms, pulling backward with everything I had. The grip from the water tightened. Another hand surfaced, then another. Not dozens, just 2, attached to something that remained just beneath sight. The false Lily began to rise higher. Her shoulders broke the surface. Her arms were bent backward at impossible angles. The real Lily sobbed beside me. "That's not me." Rusty bit at the reaching hands, teeth snapping at water that felt thicker than water. The father fired once, blindly, into the lake. The shot muffled instantly. The circle stopped, dead still. And in that sudden silence, the hands let go. The father collapsed backward onto the clay. The lake surface flattened. The false lily sank straight down without a splash. Gone. No bubbles, no ripples, just black water again. We didn't wait. We dragged him away from the edge and scrambled up the narrow bank toward open forest. Rusty stayed between us and the cave entrance, growling low the entire time. When we finally broke free of the overhang and sunlight hit our faces, the world felt too bright, too ordinary. The father lay on his back, gasping. His pant leg was soaked, but not with lake water. It smelled wrong. Not fresh, not muddy. Old, like something that had been submerged too long. He looked at his daughter, then at me. "I shot at you," he said hoarsely. "Yeah," I replied. He swallowed hard. "That wasn't her." "No," I said. "It's not just her, either." The wind moved lightly through the pines. For a moment, everything looked normal. But then Rusty stiffened again. He wasn't looking at the lake. He was looking at the tree line, at something just beyond where the sunlight stopped. I followed his gaze. Between the trunks, standing perfectly still, was a figure in a gray jacket. Watching. Same build, same height, but its arms hung slightly too long, and it did not blink. The father saw it too, his face drained of color. "There's more than one," he whispered. The figure took one slow step backward and disappeared between the trees. The lake behind us lay flat and silent, like nothing had happened. But I knew better, and so did Rusty, because as we started the long walk back toward town, he didn't walk ahead anymore. He stayed pressed against my leg, as if something might reach up from beneath the ground next, and this time there would be no warning circles on the water. We didn't run. Running would have meant panic, and panic in those woods had a way of leading you straight into the wrong place. We moved fast, but controlled. The father, his name was Mark, I learned later, kept his rifle raised the entire way back, even though the chamber was nearly empty. Lily leaned against me, limping hard, face pale but dry-eyed now. Shock had settled over her like frost. Rusty didn't bark, didn't growl. He just kept scanning the tree line. Every few steps he'd glance behind us, not at the lake, at the forest, as if the danger wasn't in the water anymore, as if it had followed us out. The forest didn't sound right. That's the first thing I noticed once we put distance between ourselves and the overhang. No birds, no insects, just the soft thud of our boots and the whisper of pine needles underfoot. Mark finally lowered the rifle when we reached the dirt path near the stream. He looked older than he had that morning, older by years. "I thought you were one of them," he muttered. "I gathered. I saw you move in the cave, but the way you moved..." He shook his head. "I've seen them mimic before." "Mimic what?" "People." The word hung in the air heavier than it should have. Lily squeezed my sleeve. "They stand wrong," she whispered. "And they blink too slow." I didn't ask how she knew. We reached the clearing near Fox Hollow just before dusk. The sky had gone amber, bleeding into purple behind the tree line. 2 trucks were parked near Mark's house. Neighbors, search volunteers. When they saw Lily between us, a wave of relief hit so hard it almost felt violent. Her mother collapsed to her knees in the yard, sobbing into her hands. People rushed forward, questions, hands, voices. But Mark didn't let anyone touch Lily right away. He held up a hand. "Not yet." His eyes moved to the tree line behind us, then to me. "You saw it too." It wasn't a question. I nodded. He looked at the others. "There's something in that lake."
The words died quickly in the open air. No one wanted to grab onto them. Instead, they focused on Lily, blankets, water, the ankle. Someone asked about the man in the gray jacket. Mark didn't answer immediately, because we both knew what that would imply. There hadn't been just one. Later that night, after the deputies took statements and the trucks rolled out, I found myself sitting at Mark's kitchen table. Lily was asleep in the next room, ankle wrapped. Rusty lay under my chair but refused to close his eyes. Mark poured 2 fingers of whiskey into thick glasses. No ice, no ceremony. We drank. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke. "This isn't the first time." My jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair. "I grew up near water like that. Different state, different forest, but same kind of place. Deep pockets, tunnels, still surfaces." He took another swallow. "People drowned every few years. Not often enough to call it cursed, just enough to be strange. And sometimes," he said slowly, "the body didn't stay down." The kitchen clock ticked too loud. Rusty shifted under the table. "They'd be seen," Mark continued.
Standing in the shallows at dusk, or just past the fog line at dawn. He looked up at me, not attacking, just watching. My mouth felt dry again, until someone walked in after them. He nodded. They never came back. Outside, wind brushed the side of the house. I thought about the false lily rising from the water, the way the surface had parted without a splash. The hands. "You think they're dead people?" I asked. He stared into his glass. "I think they're not." I left after midnight. The ride home felt longer, the road darker. When I reached the edge of Blackwood Forest, I slowed without meaning to. The entrance looked the same as it had that morning, quiet, harmless. But something had shifted. Something had become aware of me. Rusty's nails clicked softly on the porch when we reached my house. He didn't wait for me to open the door like he usually did. He pressed against it, urgent. Inside, I locked every bolt, checked every window, not because I thought something would break in, but because I didn't trust reflections anymore. I caught myself staring at the dark TV screen across the room. For just a second, I thought I saw movement behind me in the glass. Too tall, too still. I turned. Nothing. Just the hallway. Empty. Rusty growled low in his throat. Not at the door, at the mirror above the coat rack. I stepped toward it slowly. My reflection looked normal, tired, dirty, shaken. But as I leaned closer, my reflection didn't. It blinked half a second too late, just half. My blood ran cold. I stepped back immediately. The reflection corrected itself, perfectly aligned again. Rusty barked once, sharp, warning. From outside, somewhere far off in the direction of the forest, a single rifle shot echoed. Then silence. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit all evening. The lake hadn't let us leave. It had simply let us walk away. And that meant it wasn't done. The rifle shot rolled across the open fields and faded into the trees. After that, there was nothing. No second shot, no shouting. Just the kind of silence that feels heavier than sound itself. Rusty didn't move for a long time. He stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the dark window like he was listening to something far beyond what I could hear. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the lake again. The surface splitting apart, joints bending at angles they shouldn't. I kept hearing that voice say, "Dad." Clear,
calm, almost gentle. Too gentle. By morning, the news had already spread through town. They found Mark near the edge of Blackwood Forest, not far from the dirt road that leads toward the lake. He was lying on his back. His rifle was beside him. The deputy called it an accident, said he must have been alone, said there were no signs of anyone else around. His boots were still muddy. The lower part of his pant leg was damp, as if he'd stepped somewhere he shouldn't have before he went back into the trees. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain what I had seen, because what could I say? That something in the lake had tried to pull him under? That something had been standing between the trees, watching us leave? No one would have believed that. Lily and her mother left town within the week, packed quietly, didn't say goodbye, didn't answer calls. People said grief does strange things to families. I let them believe that. For a while, I stayed away from the forest, told myself I didn't need to fish, didn't need the quiet, didn't need to stand near that overhang ever again. But curiosity has a way of creeping back in, and fear fades faster than it should. 3 weeks later, I found myself back on the bike. Rusty didn't want to go. He planted himself on the porch and refused to move. I had to tug him halfway down the driveway before he finally followed. That should have been enough of a warning. It wasn't.
The ride felt different this time. Not darker, not heavier, just expectant, like something new I would return. The Queen Pine stood exactly where it always had, massive, ancient, unbothered. Tourists had left fresh boot prints along the boardwalk. Life, as far as anyone could see, had moved on. But once I passed the last marker and pushed deeper toward the lake, the forest changed again. Birds stopped, wind died, the air felt thicker, and somewhere ahead, water shifted. Not splashing, not crashing, just adjusting. I approached slower than before. Every sense sharpened. Rusty walked so close his fur brushed my leg. The lake came into view. Green, still. The overhang dark and patient. I didn't set up a rod, didn't unpack food. I just stood at the edge and watched. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then, a small ripple formed. One circle. Perfect. I stepped back instinctively, but this time, it didn't multiply. It didn't expand. It faded, like something testing distance. Not today, I muttered under my breath. Rusty's growl started low again, but not toward the water, behind me. I turned. The forest edge, about 30 yards back, shimmered faintly between the trunks, not visibly, just enough to feel wrong. And then I saw it, a shape between the trees, gray jacket, tall, still. It didn't step forward, didn't retreat. It just stood there, watching. My heartbeat pounded loud enough I thought it might echo. "Go," I whispered to Rusty. We backed away slowly, not running, not turning our backs. The shape remained motionless until the first shaft of sunlight shifted across it. Then, it flickered, like heat distortion, and vanished. I didn't wait to see if it would return. That night was worse than the first. I didn't dream, but I heard water, dripping, slow, measured, in my house. I followed the sound barefoot down the hallway. Kitchen dark, bathroom dry. The noise came from the living room, from the mirror above the coat rack. Drip, drip, drip. I stepped closer. The surface of the mirror looked wet, not visibly soaked, but distorted, like I was seeing my reflection through water. Rusty stood behind me. I leaned in,
and the reflection leaned first, not by much, a fraction of a second. Enough.
The image in the glass raised its hand before I did, and the hand bent backward at the wrist. Too far. I stumbled back. The mirror snapped normal instantly. Dry, flat, silent. Rusty barked sharply. From outside, a low sound rolled across the night. Not a gunshot, not wind, more like something heavy shifting beneath earth. I didn't sleep again. And for the first time, I understood something Mark had tried to say. It wasn't just the lake. It wasn't just the cave. It wasn't just water. It was anywhere water could hold a reflection. Anywhere the surface could separate what is from what waits beneath. And I realized something else. The lake hadn't let me leave. It had followed me home. From here on, it doesn't stay outside. It doesn't stay in the forest. It doesn't stay in reflections. It crosses. I didn't go back to the lake again, not after the mirror, not after the dripping sound. I boarded up the mirror in the hallway, took it off the wall and leaned it face down in the garage. Covered it with an old tarp like it was a body I didn't want to identify. For 3 nights, nothing happened. No circles in water, no distorted reflections, no movement behind glass. And that almost felt worse, because silence, when it comes after something like that, isn't peace. It's patience. On the 4th night, it rained, hard. The kind of steady Midwest rain that soaks into the ground and turns everything metallic. Gutters overflowed, the yard turned slick, water pooled at the edge of the porch steps. Rusty refused to go outside. He stood at the door and whined. "Go on," I told him, trying to sound normal. He didn't move. I opened the door anyway. Cold air rushed in. Rain hammered the roof. Rusty stepped onto the porch, but he didn't go into the yard. He stared at the puddles. Every single puddle. Because they were moving. Not with rain. Against it. Tiny ripples forming outward in perfect rings. 1, 2, 3. Across the entire yard. Like dozens of fingers tapping from beneath the earth. My throat went tight. I slammed the door shut, locked it, turned every light on in the house. Rusty started barking, not at the door, at the ceiling. I followed his gaze. The plaster above the living room darkened. Not cracked, darkened. A slow bloom spreading outward. Water. Drip. A drop hit the floor. Then another. I stepped back as the stain widened. It wasn't random leakage. It was centered. Perfectly circular. Directly above where I had stood the night before, staring into the mirror. The ceiling sagged slightly. Then it bulged downward, like something pressing from above. I grabbed the kitchen knife off the counter without thinking. Not because I thought it would help, just because empty hands felt worse. The bulge deepened. Plaster cracked, and water burst through. But not like a flood. It fell in a column. A straight, narrow shaft of black water that didn't splash when it hit the floor. It stood there, vertical, like a liquid pillar connecting ceiling to ground. Rusty barked. I backed toward the hallway. The column began to widen at the base, spreading, forming a shallow, reflective pool across the hardwood. And in that reflection, I saw myself, standing where I was, knife in hand, frozen, except the reflection's mouth moved. Mine didn't. "You stepped away," it said. The voice came from everywhere, not loud, not echoing, just present. I felt something inside my chest go cold. "You followed me," I said. The reflection smiled, not wide, not cruel, just slightly. "You opened the surface." The water on the floor rippled inward, not outward,
pulling toward the center, toward the place where the ceiling had split. I forced myself not to look down, because I knew what I'd see. Something rising, not splashing, just ascending through its own reflection. Rusty lunged forward suddenly and bit into the edge of the water. His teeth met resistance, not liquid.
Something solid beneath it. The column trembled, the reflection distorted, and the water surged outward violently. This time it did splash. It hit the walls, the couch, the ceiling. Then it vanished. Gone. The plaster above me hung broken and dry. The floor? Dry. No water, no damage, no stain, like it had never happened. Except for Rusty. He stumbled backward, whimpering, blood in his mouth. I dropped to my knees beside him. Hey, buddy. His gums were torn, like he'd bitten into something hard and jagged. He was shaking, looking at the ceiling, not at me. I followed his gaze again. The crack in the plaster hadn't sealed. It remained. Thin, circular, like a ring, like something marking territory. I didn't sleep at all. I stayed in the living room with every light on and Rusty pressed against my leg. Around 3 a.m., I heard something else. Not dripping, not shifting. Breathing from the hallway. Slow, measured. I stood carefully, walked toward it. The bathroom door was closed. The sound came from inside. Rusty growled low. I reached for the handle. It was wet. I pulled the door open. The shower curtain hung still. The mirror above the sink was gone. Not broken, not shattered, gone. And in its place was water. Flat, dark, filling the rectangular space where the glass should have been. A vertical lake embedded in my wall. The surface shifted slightly, and a hand pressed against it from the other side. Long fingers, bent joints, palm flat against the barrier. The reflection of my face formed slowly beside it. Not accurate, slightly stretched. Eyes too still. "You don't leave water," it said softly. "You carry it." My pulse pounded so hard I thought I might black out. Behind me, Rusty began barking uncontrollably. I turned and froze, because the hallway floor was wet. Not flooded, just damp. And small muddy footprints led from the living room to the bathroom. Bare feet, child-sized, stopping right behind me. I didn't hear them arrive. I didn't hear anything walk. The breathing sound deepened. The water in the wall bulged outward slightly. The hand pressed harder. And for the first time, I felt something worse than fear. I felt the house itself wasn't mine anymore. It had become a shoreline, and something was stepping through. This wasn't the lake reaching. This was the lake entering. And I understood then, escalation wasn't louder. It was closer. The house stayed quiet for exactly 3 seconds after I saw the footprints. 3 seconds where nothing moved. 3 seconds where the only sound was Rusty's breath turning sharp and uneven behind me. Then the water in the wall moved. Not outward. Inward. Like something on the other side had taken a step back. The hand flattened once more against the surface and slid sideways. Slow. Deliberate. The child-sized, muddy footprints behind me darkened. Fresh. Wet. I did not turn around immediately. Instinct told me something important. Whatever stood behind me didn't need to be seen to be there. "You're not coming through," I said, and my voice sounded thinner than I wanted. The reflection in the wall tilted its head.
Neither my reflection nor the hand matched the angle of my body anymore. "You already opened it," the voice replied. "Not from the wall, from the hallway, behind me." I turned, and I saw her, Lily, standing 6 feet away, barefoot, clothes damp, hair hanging wet against her shoulders. But her eyes, they were too still, too aware. Rusty lunged between us immediately, growling deep and violent. Lily's head snapped toward him in one unnatural motion. Too fast, too precise. "You left me," she said. I swallowed hard. "That's not you." Her mouth twitched.
The skin around it stretched slightly before settling back into place.
"Then who did you carry out?" My chest tightened, because I remembered something. When we'd dragged her from the forest that day, she hadn't spoken for a long time, hadn't cried, hadn't blinked much. And I had never once touched her skin directly. Not once. The Lily in front of me took one slow step forward. Her ankle didn't limp anymore. Rusty snapped at her leg. His teeth connected, but not with flesh. There was resistance, like biting into soaked wood. She looked down at him without emotion, then bent, her knee folding backward at an angle no joint should allow, and grabbed Rusty by the collar. I moved before I thought. I tackled her sideways into the hallway wall. The impact felt wrong, too light, like knocking into something hollow. We hit the floor, and she didn't scream. She didn't fight the way a child would. She twisted. Her spine arched in a smooth, boneless curve. Her face came inches from mine, and beneath the surface of her eyes, I saw movement. Shapes, not reflections. Currents. "You stepped away from the edge," she whispered, "but you never closed it." Her hand clamped around my wrist, cold, not icy, just absent of warmth. Rusty tore into her shoulder again. This time something split. Not skin, surface, like fabric giving way. And water poured out. Not blood. Water, black and thick. It soaked into the carpet instantly, vanishing as if the floor drank it. She turned her head slowly toward Rusty and smiled. Then she pulled. Not physically. I didn't feel my body move. I felt something inside me lean forward, toward her, toward the water, toward depth. The hallway behind her shifted, the walls elongated, the ceiling stretched, like I was looking down a tunnel that hadn't existed before. And at the far end of that tunnel, the lake. Green, still, waiting. Rusty barked once, loud, sharp, and bit directly into her throat. There was a sound, not a scream.
Not a growl, more like a sudden suction. The shape of Lily collapsed, folding inward, water spilling out and then snapping back toward the bathroom wall. The hallway slammed back into place, normal length, normal walls. The bathroom mirror space returned to drywall, cracked, dry, silent. The muddy footprints evaporated, gone. Rusty staggered backward, breathing hard. His fur was soaked, but when I touched him, he was dry. He looked up at me, and for a split second, his eyes didn't look like Rusty's. They looked reflective, flat, surface deep. Then he blinked, normal again. My stomach dropped. "Rusty," I whispered. He wagged his tail weakly, but something had changed. I could feel it. The house felt lighter, quieter, like something had withdrawn, but not defeated, not destroyed, just repositioned. And then I heard it. Not inside, outside, from somewhere beneath the porch. Water moving. Not in pipes, not rain, but current. Low, steady, like a shoreline shifting inches at a time. I stepped to the front window slowly,
pulled the curtain aside. The yard looked normal. Grass, mud, no standing water. But the ground along the edge of the porch was sinking. Not collapsing, lowering, slowly, like soil being hollowed out from underneath. A shallow depression formed, then deepened, and at the bottom of it, water surfaced. Green, still, perfectly round. A pool forming in my front yard, 10 feet across. No source, no overflow, just appearing. Rusty began barking again, but not aggressively, panicked. The pool widened, grass sliding inward, soil dissolving without sound. The surface remained perfectly smooth until a ripple formed. One circle, perfect. Then another, and another. I stumbled back from the window because I understood something irreversible. It wasn't trying to reach from the lake anymore. It had moved the lake, and it had chosen my house. This wasn't haunting. This wasn't mimicry. This was relocation. The shoreline had shifted.
And I was standing exactly where the water wanted to be, outside. The green pool widened another foot, and something beneath the surface turned slowly, aligning itself, facing the house, facing me. And this time, there would be no forest to escape into. The pool stopped widening just before it reached the porch steps. It didn't flood. It didn't overflow. It simply settled. A perfect circle of green water in the center of my yard. Still. Too still. No rain fed it. No stream connected to it. It just existed, like it had always been there, and the ground had only just remembered. Rusty backed away from the window, hackles raised so high his spine looked ridged. I grabbed my truck keys. There was no plan beyond distance. Distance from the house, distance from the yard, distance from whatever had decided to anchor itself here. "Come on," I said. Rusty didn't move. He stood frozen, staring at the front door. Not the yard, the door. Something tapped against it, not knocking, just testing, soft, measured. 3 slow touches. My chest tightened. I didn't open it. Instead, I stepped back. The tapping came again, then stopped. Silence returned, heavy. Rusty's growl deepened, not at the door anymore, but at the floorboards. I looked down. The hardwood beneath us darkened, circular, the same size as the stain in the ceiling had been. Only this time it wasn't a stain. It was depth. The wood thinned like paper, then vanished, leaving a perfect opening, a pool inside my living room, mirroring the one outside. And beneath the surface, movement. The green yard pool rippled at the exact same moment, like they were connected, 2 mouths of the same body. "You don't leave water," the voice said again. It wasn't coming from the surface. It was coming from everywhere moisture existed, from the damp air, from Rusty's breath, from inside my own lungs. Rusty lunged at the indoor pool. He hit the surface hard, and this time, he went through. There was no splash, no break. He simply passed downward, like falling through glass. "Rusty!" I dove without thinking. The second my body touched the surface, the house vanished. The yard vanished. Gravity changed direction. I wasn't underwater. I wasn't drowning. I was suspended in green light. Around me, shapes moved, not swimming, drifting. Human silhouettes, dozens, arms hanging too long, spines curved wrong, faces tilted, watching. I turned frantically. "Rusty!" There, a few feet below me, his body floated limp.
Not dead, but held. Thin strands extended from below, like translucent roots wrapped around his legs. I kicked downward. But movement here wasn't physical. It responded to thought, to fear, to awareness. The more I panicked, the further away he seemed. "You stepped away from the edge," the voice murmured again. The shapes shifted around me, slow, curious. "And you came back." A figure moved forward from the green haze. Tall, shoulders too narrow, arms slightly too long. The gray jacket. It wasn't worn. It wasn't cloth. It was texture, skin mimicking fabric. "You don't fight depth," it said. The face wasn't Mark, wasn't Lily, wasn't anyone specific. It was composite, borrowed. Its eyes held no whites, just reflective surface. "You join it." Rusty twitched below me, struggled weakly. The root-like strands tightened. I forced myself still, forced my breathing calm. If movement here responded to thought, then so would stillness. The green light pulsed faintly. The dozens of drifting shapes slowed. The gray jacket figure tilted its head. "You resist." I focused on one thing. Rusty. Not fear, not the figures, not the depth. Just him. I pictured him on the porch, in the yard, on the bike trail. Alive, solid, real. The green light around me flickered. The strands around Rusty loosened slightly. The gray jacket figure stepped closer.
Not walking, phasing. "You opened the surface," it said again, "and surfaces connect." I understood then. It didn't pull people under. It waited for alignment, for fear, for curiosity, for the moment someone leaned too close. And I had leaned, at the lake, at the mirror, at the puddles. Every time I had stared back instead of turning away. This wasn't invasion. It was permission. I looked at the gray jacket figure, and instead of fear, I gave it refusal. Not shouted, not desperate, just certain. "You don't get him." The green space tightened. The shapes around us recoiled slightly. The figure's head tilted farther than before. "Depth is inevitable." "Not tonight," I said. I stopped thinking about the lake, stopped thinking about reflections, stopped thinking about water at all. I thought of dry ground, of sun, of dust, of wind moving through tall grass, of heat cracking earth open. The green light faltered. The strands snapped. Rusty dropped. I grabbed him and pulled upward, and this time gravity listened. The green surface above split like thin ice. We broke through, back into the living room. Air slammed into my lungs. Water did not follow. The indoor pool collapsed instantly into dry hardwood. Outside, the yard pool shrank, rapidly. Grass rising back into place, soil sealing. Within seconds, it was gone. Only a faint circular depression remained. Rusty lay coughing beside me, alive, bleeding lightly from his gums, but solid. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No water sounds, no dripping, no breathing, just wind outside. I didn't move for a long time. Neither did he. Finally, I stood and walked to the window. The yard looked normal. No green surface, no ripples, no movement. But as I turned away, I saw something in the reflection of the dark glass. Not behind me, not in the house. Far out in the direction of Blackwood Forest. A thin green shimmer.
like light bending over water.
It hadn't been destroyed. It hadn't been defeated. It had withdrawn, back to where it belonged. For now. I pulled every curtain closed, removed every mirror, drained every sink, and I never went near Blackwood again. But sometimes, when it rains and puddles form in the yard, Rusty stares at them. And I don't look, because I learned something in that green space. Water doesn't chase, it waits, and the surface is always closer than you